The hum of the comms array was the only sound in the control chamber of Outpost 9. A faint buzz, a tired heartbeat from machines that were older than the man keeping them alive. Mark Raleigh sat hunched over a scratched console, the glow of its analog screens painting his hollow face with green light. His cracked mug of cold coffee leaned dangerously close to the edge. It was 0307 station time, the kind of hour when the universe felt empty, when humanity's scattered outposts seemed more like forgotten tombstones than sentinels. At first, the sound was just static, a faint pulse hidden inside the hiss. Mark almost ignored it: cosmic radiation, solar interference, maybe even some busted relay coughing data. But the rhythm made him pause. 3 beats. A pause. 3 beats again. Like a heart trying to restart after drowning. Mark leaned forward, rubbing tired eyes with the heel of his palm. He wasn't a scientist, wasn't a brilliant engineer. He was just a comms tech, one of the last trained to keep ancient analog gear running. That was why he was here, stationed on the edge of nothing, patching together wires with duct tape, praying the processors didn't finally give up on him. But this sound, this wasn't noise. He adjusted the gain, isolating the channel. The static sharpened into distinct pulses. Low frequency, too regular to be natural. He whispered without realizing it. "That's not random." The screen flickered as the waveform formed jagged mountains across the display. Mark's pulse quickened. It was a message. Not human, maybe not even meant for humans, but a signal. A voice whispering through the void. And no one else had noticed. For hours he sat glued to the console, recording, replaying, sketching symbols on the back of scrap paper. His head pounded from exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. Each cycle of pulses carried weight, structure, intent. By dawn he had something resembling translation, a phrase buried in the noise, 4 words that sent a chill down his spine. "They will burn us all." Mark stared at the scrawled letters, breath fogging the glass of the console. He replayed it again and again, hoping he was wrong. But the cadence was clear. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't metaphor. It was a warning. And then the channel went silent. For 3 days, Mark barely ate, barely slept. He studied every byte, every jagged spike of the recording. His station was irrelevant to the directorate, hell, that was why he was even posted here. Nobody cared what happened in Outpost 9, which was exactly why, when he finally transmitted a decoded fragment to Earth, he marked it low priority. He expected silence. He expected mockery. But that night, everything changed. A ship arrived. Mark watched from the docking bay window as the black silhouette drifted into alignment. Sleek, angular, no registry lights, no insignia. The kind of ship that didn't exist on paper. His stomach turned to stone. 3 men boarded. Gray uniforms, no ranks, no names. They didn't salute, didn't ask permission. Their boots echoed sharp against the deck plates as they handed him a sealed envelope. One line typed across the page. "Forget the message. You never heard it." Mark's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I have the recordings, One of the men backhanded him so hard he hit the floor. The other smiled as he ground a boot against Mark's wrist until it snapped. The sound was sharp, wet. Mark bit back a scream. "Global security issue," the man said flatly. "You speak of this again and it won't just be your wrist." They wiped everything, drives, backups, even the analog tapes, melted down in acid, Mark's work gone in minutes. By the time they left, Outpost 9 looked untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. But Mark wasn't stupid. He had carved the pattern into the steel underside of his cot. Every pulse, every pause, etched deep with a broken screwdriver. They couldn't erase that. He would not forget. Weeks passed. Then months. The signal didn't return, but something worse took its place. Black ships, dozens, moving in shadows across the orbital lanes, docking at outposts, erasing civilian networks one by one. The directorate called it maintenance. The media parroted the same line. Mark knew better. Something was coming, and someone, something, not human, had tried to warn them. He wasn't alone. Quietly, through encrypted channels thought long dead, others began reaching out. Comms techs like him, paranoid engineers, stubborn mechanics, broken veterans who didn't trust the system anymore. They called themselves Equers, the ones who listened when no one else would. Mark didn't ask to lead, but he had been the first to hear, the first to suffer for it. and so the circle formed around him. Then the fragments returned, hidden in cosmic noise, buried under asteroid interference, disguised as background radiation. The Equors pieced them together bit by bit. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. We hid as long as we could. Do not respond. They listen. Burning worlds, burning everything that resists. And then the phrase that hollowed Mark's chest like a bullet. Earth is next. He didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Every blink, every flicker of the console replayed the words, Earth is next. Mark did what he swore he never would. He called her. Anya Korolev, ex-defense directorate. Once his friend, once more than that, before her ethics got her burned, and before she called him a coward for keeping silent. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was colder than the vacuum outside his viewport. Didn't think you'd ever crawl back. I've got something, Mark said, his voice cracked, raw. Something real. You always do, Mark. Then it disappears, or you get drunk, or the directorate tells you to forget it. Why is this time different? Because it's not just a signal. It's a warning, and they're coming here. Silence long, heavy. Then prove it. He sent the file, the waveform, the translation. Most importantly, the frequency overlap with Earth's military satellites. 2 hours later, a single message returned. Get off that station, now. Mark's blood froze. His fingers hovered over the console keys. He was about to ask what she meant when the lights cut out. The hum of the station died. No flicker, no warning, just silence. Mark grabbed the emergency flashlight from the drawer, his broken wrist aching as if it had just been snapped again. The ventilation had gone offline. 6 hours of breathable air left. Backup systems, dead. Comms, dead. Then he heard it. A thud. Not from the control room, not from the hallway, from the hull. Mark froze, breath shallow. His pulse thundered in his ears. No ships were scheduled. No crews, no rescue. No one was supposed to know where he was except Anya. And she didn't have access to black ships. The sound came again, a scraping, claws dragging metal. Then the external camera feed flickered, just long enough to show something crawling across the outer shell of the station. Not human. Not even close. It moved in jerks and spasms, limbs bending wrong, head lolling like it didn't belong to the body it carried. Mark staggered back from the screen. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled across the floor, casting long, trembling shadows. They weren't here to investigate. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to silence the message. And they were already inside. Mark's hands trembled as he fumbled through the drawer. He found nothing useful, no gun, no blade, only a rusted crowbar coated in oil and dust. His brother used to call tools like this the honest man's weapon. Right now, it was all he had. The station creaked. Somewhere far down the corridor, metal groaned like a jaw opening. The flashlight beam shook as Mark crept forward, his boots whispering across the deck plates. The control room was behind him now. Ahead stretched a long passage lit only by flickering emergency strips, shadows twisting like liquid against the walls. Then came the sound again. Scrape. Closer this time. Mark stopped breathing. He leaned against the bulkhead, crowbar slick with sweat in his grip. The scraping turned into a wet, dragging noise. Something was crawling toward him. His heart hammered. Instinct screamed to run, but he forced himself still, teeth clenched. He had survived the black ship men by hiding his fear. This had to be no different. A shadow broke into view at the far end of the corridor. Pale skin stretched too thin over a body too long. Limbs crooked at wrong angles. No eyes, no mouth, no features, only a grotesque impression of what a body should be. It moved in spasms, twitching like a marionette with strings cut and retied. Mark raised the crowbar. His breath echoed like thunder in the silence. The thing froze, its head jerked sideways with a sickening crack. Then, impossibly, it smiled. Not with lips, it had none. Its skin simply stretched upward into the grotesque suggestion of a grin. Mark's legs nearly gave out. Jesus. The lights above flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the corridor. He ran. The crowbar clanged against the wall as he sprinted, lungs burning. He cut down a side passage toward the armory hatch. He had no clearance, but he had a crowbar and desperation. Behind him, the sound of pursuit rattled the walls. clawed hands scraping metal, bodies moving too fast, too wrong. Mark slammed into the hatch and began prying the access panel open. His fingers bled as he ripped wires free, forcing the lock to cycle. The panel sparked and hissed. The hatch groaned open. Inside, racks of weapons gleamed in the red emergency glow. Directorate standard kinetic rifles, shock batons, rail pistols. Mark dropped the crowbar and grabbed the nearest pistol, its weight solid, real, familiar. A shadow passed the doorway. Mark raised the weapon, hands shaking. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's see what you're made of." The creature lunged. Mark fired. The rail pistol thundered, recoil jarring his broken wrist. The round tore straight through the thing's chest. It collapsed with a wet slap against the deck. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the other two stepped into view. Identical, pale, smiling. Mark backed up, pistol trembling in his hand. Back the hell off. They didn't move, didn't blink. Their heads tilted at the same unnatural angle, synchronized. Mark pulled the trigger again, another deafening shot. One fell, the last one didn't even flinch. Instead, it smiled wider. Mark's breath hitched, his gut turned to ice. "They don't care," he whispered. "They just wanted to see if I'd do it." The surviving thing twitched once and vanished into the shadows. Mark didn't wait. He sprinted toward the escape pod bay. The alarms blared. Not the stations, these were external emergency overrides. The pod bay lights came online as Mark skidded into the chamber. He slammed the hatch shut behind him, locking it manually. The pod systems were already humming. Someone was activating them remotely. Anya. "God bless you," Mark muttered, shoving himself into the pilot's chair. His hands shook as he strapped in. His eyes flicked to the viewport and froze. Through the cracked control room window across the hull, dozens of those pale things stood. Silent, still, watching him. Not chasing, not attacking, just watching. Because he wasn't the target anymore. Earth was. Mark's throat closed. His fingers slammed the launch override. The pod tore free of Outpost 9, thrusters igniting. The station shrank behind him, a husk of metal floating in shadow, infested with things humanity wasn't supposed to see. The pod screamed through atmosphere like a coffin on fire. Mark braced, clutching the rusted safety bar as flames licked the viewport. Earth's blue curve split into jagged shards through a growing crack in the glass. He should have blacked out. The G-force should have crushed him. But fear had burned itself into something harder, conviction. The pod slammed into the ocean west of the Galapagos. Metal shrieked, seals burst, saltwater rushed in. Mark fought the manual release, lungs screaming. He dragged himself out as the pod sank, waves tossing him like a rag doll. Lightning split the sky. Rain lashed his face. He clung to a panel of shattered hull, gasping, coughing, cursing. 2 hours later, a boat found him. Unmarked white hull, no flag. He thought he was hallucinating when he saw her. "Mark." Anya, her hair was streaked with gray now, her eyes harder, sharper. She threw a towel over his shoulders and whispered, "You look like hell." He coughed seawater, managed a bitter smile. "You should see the things that chased me." Her jaw clenched. She didn't need to ask, she already knew. They made landfall in Ecuador. Anya led him through winding mountain roads in an old truck to a forgotten safe house high in the Andes. The building groaned under the wind, generators sputtering like dying beasts. For the first time in months, Mark slept. When he woke, Anya was waiting with coffee and a data pad. Her steel-gray eyes bored into him. "You weren't the only one who heard the signal," she said, "but you were the only one stupid enough to go public." Mark rubbed his temple, his hands still shook. "They came after me, not directorate men this time, creatures inside the station." "I know." His blood chilled. "You've seen them before." She nodded. Not many lived to report it. "Then why hasn't the world been warned?" Anya's jaw tightened. "Because the world doesn't care until it's bleeding, and by the time it bleeds, it's already too late." Mark stared at her data pad. Rows of decrypted transmissions filled the screen, fragments of the same pulse, same plea. More outposts, more echoes. He wasn't alone anymore. "So what?" Mark asked. "We just wait for Earth to burn." "No," Anya said flatly. "We hunt them first." Mark froze. "You have a team." Her eyes darkened. "Not anymore. The directorate buried the project years ago, disavowed everything. but I kept files, contacts, enough to build a net. Mark frowned. A net for what? To catch one alive. His chest tightened. Are you insane? You want to interrogate one of those things? I want to dissect its mind before it kills millions. There it was, the Anya he remembered, the soldier, the one who'd nearly been executed for exposing a neuroweapon test on civilians, the woman who never played games. Mark sat back, stunned. He had stared into those things' empty faces and seen only death. You better know what you're doing. Her voice was steel. I don't, but doing nothing means letting them win. They traveled light. No backup, no directorate oversight. Just the two of them and a half-functioning drone Anya called Brick, a boxy relic of an AI with the personality of a dead toaster. Their first stop was a military scrapyard in Lima. Beneath the rusting corpses of satellites, they unearthed a black crate marked Project Echo Black. Inside was an EMP net trap, illegal, erased from history, designed for non-human threats. A ghost weapon. Mark ran his fingers along the tangled coils. Where the hell did you get this? Stole it from a lab that burned down 2 days later, Anya said without blinking. Mark didn't ask more. Next came bait, and bait meant contact. They tracked anomalies across Peru, animals vanishing, drones failing mid-flight, shadows moving too fast. The echoes whispered through encrypted channels. All signs pointed to an abandoned hydroelectric plant deep in the Andes. They set the trap, old marine batteries wired by hand, motion sensors rigged to manual triggers. The place reeked of rust and damp stone. Seal all exits, Anya said, checking a rifle's magazine. Trip the net, pray it doesn't kill us both. Mark's gut twisted. I've seen their eyes, Anya, or lack of them. You don't catch death in a net. Her lips curled into a thin smile. We'll see. Night fell fast in the mountains. The air turned sharp, biting. Just past midnight, the lights flickered. Brick went offline. Mark's breath caught. It's here. The analog camera showed only darkness, then movement, a blur. The trap flared. Blue arcs lit the control chamber. The air screamed as electricity wrapped something writhing, twitching in the net. Mark sprinted down the metal stairs, pistol raised. Anya followed. And there it was. Pale insectoid. Wrong, not armored, not mechanical, just flesh. Its skin peeled back as it hissed, pretending to be a face. Mark aimed at its skull. You sure we want this alive? No, Anya said, raising her rifle, but we need it alive. The thing twitched violently, shrieking without sound. Then it stopped, its head snapped toward Mark, and without a mouth, without a voice, it spoke. Not us, not message. We run, we scream, you hear. Mark's blood froze. The voice wasn't alien, it was human. Anya's face drained of color. The creature wasn't the threat. It was the warning. The net sizzled, blue arcs crawling over the pale body as it twitched like a broken insect. Mark's ears rang with the phantom scream inside his skull. Not us, not message. We run, we scream, you hear. Mark staggered back a step, rail pistol still raised. His breath fogged in the cold mountain air leaking through broken windows. Anya, he whispered, it's not the killer, it's running from something else. The thing writhed, convulsed. Its limbs bent like shattered sticks, jerking against the arcs of the EMP field. Its faceless head tilted at him, impossibly expressive despite having no eyes, no mouth. We flee, you answer, they come. Anya's jaw clenched. She didn't lower her rifle, but her voice was steadier than his. Then what the hell are they? The creature shuddered, electricity crawling up its spine. In Mark's head, the answer hit like ice water poured down his bones. Hunters, burners, erasers, not us, them. The word erasers stabbed deep. Mark's knees weakened. The months of paranoia, the black ships, the silent stations, all of it fell into place. The pale creatures weren't the threat. They were survivors, warnings given flesh. And humans, in their blind arrogance, had answered the call. Which meant... They followed the signal, Mark whispered. His stomach turned to stone. We gave them a trail. The thing convulsed again. Sparks spat off the coils. The net was failing. Anya fired a short burst into the ceiling, sparking concrete dust into the air. Mark, do we kill it or keep it breathing? Before he could answer, the lights died. The hum of the trap vanished. The creature twitched once and then it was gone. Not running, not breaking free, just gone, as if it had blinked out of reality. A sound followed, not mechanical, not animal. A low vibration that rattled Mark's teeth and made his bones ache. It wasn't sound at all. It was pressure, a presence pressing in from outside. Anya's voice was a whisper, "We're not alone." They grabbed what they could and bolted into the mountains. The hydroelectric plant collapsed behind them as the old turbines imploded, crushed as if some invisible hand had twisted the steel into knots. They didn't look back. By dawn, they reached a resistant safe house outside Cusco, a half-collapsed warehouse shielded by hydroponic farms and jury-rigged drones. Inside, the Equors were waiting. Mark froze as eyes turned toward him, 20 faces, scarred, tired, stubborn. Engineers, hackers, old soldiers, even a priest with burned scars crawling up his throat. Every one of them looked at Mark as though he carried a shadow with him. "You were the first," one of them said. A thin man with a rifle patched together from 3 different models. His arms were covered in melted scars. "The first to hear." Mark swallowed, his throat was dry. "I didn't mean to answer it." The man shook his head. "But you did, and now they're here." Mark wanted to deny it, wanted to scream that he hadn't chosen this, that he'd only been curious, lonely, stubborn, but he couldn't. He had answered, and something in the dark had answered back. For days they compared fragments. The Equors had more than he thought. Bits of transmissions stolen from dead satellites, waveforms hidden in radiation belts, broken echoes of a scream that had crossed stars. The message was always the same. Not a war cry, not a declaration, a plea. "We hid as long as we could. Do not respond. They listen. They burn everything that resists. Earth is next." The room went cold every time those words replayed. Anya stood at the head of the table, eyes hard. "The Directorate has buried this. Every Equor knows it. They'd rather erase the evidence than admit the threat, which means we're on our own." "On our own?" someone scoffed. A woman with mechanical prosthetics instead of legs. "Against what? You saw what those things did to Outpost 9. Against that." Mark slammed a hand on the table. "It wasn't them." Silence, dozens of eyes burned into him. "They're prey," Mark said, voice raw. "They're running from something worse, and now that something knows where Earth is." A murmur rippled through the Equors. Someone cursed, someone else prayed. Anya didn't flinch. "Then we make a choice. We can wait for it to erase us, or we can fight back." "How do you fight something you can't even see?" Her answer was a whisper, "We make it bleed." That night Mark couldn't sleep. He lay awake in a cot surrounded by flickering shadows, staring at the cracked ceiling. Every time he blinked, he saw the faceless creature in the net. "Not us, not message. We run, we scream, you hear." He wanted to believe it, but part of him wondered if this was another trap, another manipulation, another lie. He thought of his brother, the fire, the moment he had failed to save him. That guilt had carved him hollow. Now it felt like the same guilt had carved the signal into his bones. The universe didn't care, the Directorate didn't care. But he had listened, and that meant something. Even if it killed him. At dawn, the first town vanished. No explosion, no flash, just gone. A village in Brazil, small, off-grid. Homes, roads, people erased, as if someone had dragged an eraser across reality itself. Drones sent to investigate captured footage of empty land, flat and raw, with no trace of human life. By nightfall, 3 more places vanished. Northern Alaska, central Indonesia, Angola. Not vaporized, not scorched, erased. Like the world itself had glitched and overwritten entire regions. The safe house fell into chaos. "It's starting. My family. We have to hide." Anya silenced them with a single shout. "Enough." The room froze. She turned to Mark. Her voice was low, steady, deadly calm. "You said they burn everything that resists. What does that mean?" Mark swallowed hard. His throat felt like ash. "It means they don't conquer, they don't enslave, they remove, like a system reset." The priest with the burn scars leaned forward. His eyes were hollow. "You don't fight a delete button, you pull the plug." Everyone stared at him. For once, Mark felt like he understood. The signal hadn't been a warning of invasion. It had been a warning of extinction. And humans, stubborn, impossible humans, had answered it. By the second week, half the satellite grid was gone. Surveillance, GPS, comm relays, all offline. The world staggered. Governments denied, directorate broadcasts preached calm. But Mark saw the truth in every broken feed. Earth was being dismantled piece by piece. Anya pulled him aside one night, away from the others. The generator hummed in the background, weak and failing. "I've got a plan," she said. Mark almost laughed. "You always do." "This one's worse." She spread a map across a rusted table, a circle drawn over Antarctica. The old deep space relay tower, built in the 2040s, abandoned decades ago, but it still exists, analog, untouchable. Mark frowned. "And what do you want to do with it?" She leaned closer, her voice was sharp as glass. "Turn Earth invisible, jam the scent trail, make them lose us." Mark stared at the map, his gut twisted. "That's suicide." Her eyes didn't blink. "Maybe, but it's better than waiting to vanish." The safe house murmured with unease as she explained it to the Equors. Some argued, some called her insane, but others, the broken ones, the stubborn ones, the ones who had already lost everything, nodded. Mark studied the map, his hands shaking, his voice cracked. "And if it doesn't work?" Anya's reply was cold. "Then at least Earth doesn't go quietly." 2 nights later, they were on the move. Cargo skiffs hacked from directorate registries, black market transports, rented fishing boats that hugged storm-tossed seas. Every step of the journey, people vanished. Not killed, not taken, just gone, 1 second there. The next, not even footprints. By the time they reached the ice sheets of Antarctica, 4 Equors were missing. Mark stopped, looking behind him after the second. The relay tower loomed above the ice like a tombstone of a forgotten century. Frost coated its frame. The hatch was rusted shut. Anya burned it open with thermite. Inside, the air was colder than death, but the consoles still hummed faintly, untouched by time. Mark's chest tightened. His broken wrist ached as he ran his hand over the controls. The machine roared to life like some beast dragged from a frozen grave. "It'll work," he whispered. His voice was half hope, half madness. Anya stood beside him, rifle slung over her shoulder, her steel-gray eyes locked on his. "It has to." Mark's hand hovered over the transmit switch. His lungs burned, his heart pounded. This wasn't just defiance, it was suicide dressed as hope. He thought of the plea, "Do not respond, they listen." Then he pressed the button. The air folded, the walls shook, the earth itself groaned as if something massive had been struck. The console screamed, red lights flashing. And then, silence. The sky above the tower shimmered, the stars shifted. And for the first time in weeks, the disappearances stopped. Mark collapsed into the chair, chest heaving, hands trembling. "Did it work?" he whispered. No one answered. Because outside the frost-coated windows, something vast had appeared above the horizon. A jagged tear in the sky. Watching. Waiting. All right, here's part 4 asterisk of asterisk echoes in the void. The signal humanity was never meant to hear asterisk. \1, 401, 500 words, suspenseful, cinematic, HFY style, ending with a brutal twist. Part 4, the sky that watched back. The frost-trimmed windows of the relay tower pulsed red with warning lights. Outside, the Antarctic night glowed wrong. The tear in the sky wasn't like anything Mark had ever seen. Not a ship, not a station, not even an object. It was an absence, a jagged wound cut through the stars. Its edges bled shadow, flickering like torn fabric. The Equors crowded against the windows. Some prayed, some screamed, others just stared hollow. "It's watching us," whispered Navarro, a young biologist with a scar down his cheek. Mark's chest felt hollow, his hands shook. "No, it's me it's watching." Anya's head snapped toward him. Her eyes were sharp, steel under pressure. "What are you talking about?" He swallowed hard, his voice cracked. "Ever since I first answered the signal, I can asterisk feel them, like a spotlight in my skull. They're not looking for Earth, they're looking for me." The room went silent. Anya stared for a long moment, then spoke low. "Then your bait." The tear pulsed. A low vibration rattled through the ice, deep and hungry. It wasn't sound, it was weight pressing down on existence itself. Mark doubled over, clutching his skull. He saw flashes, burned cities, oceans turned to glass, towers of bone rising from black soil. He felt the screams of 1 billion dead. He smelled fire. Mark, Anya's hands grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "Stay with me." He gasped, sweat pouring down his face. "They're not soldiers, not conquerors. They're cleaners, erasers. They don't fight. They remove asterisk." Navarro's face went pale, like biological software. Anya's jaw clenched. "Then we corrupt the code." They worked without sleeping. Navarro pulled fragments of psychic impressions from Mark's descriptions. Anya stripped the relay console down to its analog bones, rerouting power through marine batteries and jury-rigged coils. The plan was insane. Use Mark as an asterisk anchor, let the cleaners trace him, then feed them back something they couldn't process. Not logic, not fear, not surrender. But humanity. Raw, chaotic, ugly. The one thing no machine could predict. The first test nearly killed him. Mark stood in the resonance chamber, electrodes strapped to his temples, the air thick with ozone. His heart thundered. Anya's voice came through the crackling intercom. "Ready." He forced a crooked smile. "If I come back wrong, you put me down." Her silence was heavy, then always. The switch flipped. It wasn't like sound. It wasn't even like thought. The pulse was a scream ripped straight out of his bones and fired into the sky. His memories, his grief, his rage, the fire that killed his brother, the guilt that carved him hollow, the loneliness of Outpost 9, all of it ripped out and broadcasted raw. The world shook. The tear in the sky twitched. For the first time, it reacted. Mark collapsed, vomiting blood. His body seized, convulsing. Anya and Navarro dragged him from the chamber, his veins lit with blue fire under his skin. When his eyes fluttered open, his voice was a rasp. "It worked. We hurt them." For 6 hours, the sky held still. The vanishings stopped. The stars remained. But then, new tiers opened. Not one, not two. Dozens. Above oceans, above cities. One hovered over New York for 3 full minutes before vanishing. The world panicked, governments fractured, the directorate collapsed. But the echoers, the stubborn, broken ones, rose. A new net formed, not sanctioned, not commanded, not led by nations, but by people who refused to vanish quietly. And at the center of it all was Mark. The second pulse was stronger, longer. This time they laced it with more than pain. They spiked it with memory, with love twisted into rage, grief sharpened into knives, the kind of noise only humans could make. It hit the sky like thunder from a dying god. The tears flinched, not physically, but Mark felt asterisk it, a twitch, a retreat. "We're hurting them," he whispered. "How much?" Anya asked. "Not enough." The third pulse cost them Navarro. He collapsed mid-cycle, blood streaming from his ears. His body lived. His mind didn't. His eyes stared blank, trapped in some echo chamber no human could follow. Anya shut down the system with a scream. Sparks rained across the chamber. The stink of burned flesh filled the air. Mark knelt beside Navarro's body, fists shaking. "We pushed too far." Anya's voice broke. "You call this close?" "Yes," Mark whispered. His eyes were hollow, burning, because it means they can bleed. It became a cycle. Transmit, watch the sky shift. Lose someone, rebuild. Every time more tears appeared. Every time more people vanished. But every time Mark felt the system cracking. And then it happened. For the first time, an erased zone came back. Not fully, just fragments. Half a field in Indonesia, a broken structure in Alaska. But it was enough. "They're not deleting us," Anya whispered over the glowing feed. Her eyes were wide. "They're overwriting." Mark nodded slowly, "And we're corrupting the code." On the 30th day, they prepared the final test. No electrodes, no safety net. Just Mark himself in the chamber, bare and raw. They loaded the full spectrum, every emotion, every scar. His brother's screams. The fire. The memory of drowning in salt water. The loneliness of Outpost 9. The crack of his wrist breaking under a boot. The look in Anya's eyes the day she walked away. All of it. Anya stood at the console, face pale, lips pressed tight. "You don't have to do this." Mark gave her a crooked smile. His voice was steady. "Yes, I do." He stepped into the chamber. "Ready. Always." The switch flipped. And the world screamed. The tears shattered. Not faded, not closed. Shattered like glass, fragments raining across the sky, disintegrating before they touched the ground. For the first time in weeks, people saw stars again, not the same stars. New ones, clearer, brighter. The network had fractured. Not because of weapons, not because of strategy, but because humanity had given it something it had never prepared for, the unfiltered horror of being human. Mark collapsed, his body convulsed, blood pouring from his mouth. He didn't wake for 3 days. When he did, Anya was there. Her eyes were red. Her hands hovered near her pistol, ready if he came back wrong. But when Mark opened his eyes, they were calm, focused. Navarro sat by the window, alive. His voice was soft. "They let me go." Mark's chest burned with quiet laughter. "I figured." Anya leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "Did we win?" Mark shook his head. "No, but we scared them." That night, Mark walked out onto the frozen field, staring up at the sky. It was brighter now, cleaner. But never still. He could feel it. They weren't gone. They had just changed shape. The cleaners hadn't left. They had simply switched tactics. And this time, they weren't coming for Earth. They were coming for him. Excellent, here's part 5 asterisk of asterisk echoes in the void. The signal humanity was never meant to hear asterisk. \1, 401, 500 words, cinematic HFY style, suspense plus emotion, ending on a shocking reveal. Part 5, the man who became the signal. The Antarctic wind howled against the relay tower, but Mark barely heard it. He stood alone in the snow, his boots sinking into frost, his breath fogging the night air. The stars above shimmered, wrong again, not shifting violently like before, but bending, watching, waiting. Something inside him pulsed with each flicker, a rhythm, a tether. He knew the truth before he admitted it. The jamming signal hadn't erased the trail, it had masked it with him. Mark Raleigh wasn't just the man who had answered the void, he had become the new beacon. The headache started first, splitting, blinding like drills boring into the base of his skull. Then came the nosebleeds, sudden and heavy. By the 3rd day, his vision blurred at the edges, static crawling across his sight like interference on an old screen. Anya kept watch, her steel-gray eyes sharper than ever. Navarro tried scans, brain maps, neuro readings. None of them made sense. His brain waves didn't match his old baseline. "You're not damaged," Navarro muttered, staring at the results. His hands shook. "You're tuned." Mark forced a laugh, bitter and raw. "Tuned to what?" Navarro hesitated. "To them, but also not just them." Anya's voice was steady, but her hand hovered near her pistol. "Is he a threat?" Navarro shook his head. "He's something else, something I don't have a name for." Mark leaned back against the cold wall, hollow-eyed, calm in a way that scared even him. "I do, I'm bait." That night he dreamed. The faceless creatures, the fleeing ones, the ones who screamed warnings into the void, stood in a circle around him. But their heads weren't tilted in confusion anymore. They were bowed, like mourners. Behind them, shadows moved, taller, sharper, formless. He felt their hunger more than he saw it. And then one of the pale creatures spoke inside his head again, its thought like a whisper carried by fire. "You carry it now, you are the scent." Mark jolted awake, his sheets soaked in blood from his nose. Anya was there instantly, pistol in one hand, a rag in the other. She pressed the cloth against his face, her jaw clenched. "Tell me." His voice was hoarse. "They don't need to follow Earth anymore, they can follow me." Her silence was heavier than any scream. The Equors wanted to leave him. Some argued to exile him into the ice, others to kill him outright. But Anya stood between them and Mark, her voice like a blade. "You kill him, you kill our only chance." The warehouse was silent. Some muttered curses, others spit in disgust. But no one touched him after that. Mark didn't thank her, didn't dare. Gratitude felt like weakness. Because deep down he agreed with them. If he was the beacon, then Earth's only hope was to use him. They built the trap around him. Navarro called it a resonance chamber, a crude psychic dive interface. Illegal, forgotten, dangerous. They dragged it from the cryo vault beneath the tower, wires sparking, generators groaning. An old system once meant for dream therapy, now retooled into something else. Mark lay on the steel cot, electrodes biting into his temples, IV drip feeding him stabilizers. Anya stood at the console. Her jaw was set, her finger brushing the trigger of her pistol. "You come back wrong," she said flatly. "I end it." Mark managed a crooked smile. "That's why I trust you." And then she activated the loop. He fell, not into sleep, not into dreams, into himself. The corridors of his mind twisted into impossible landscapes. His brother's fire replayed, only this time he wasn't reaching in, he was standing next to the shadow, smiling. "You blame yourself," the voice whispered. "So we grew in that guilt, you fed us with pain, with doubt, with meaning." Mark stumbled through a hall of faces, every echo he had met, dead, starring. "You're not real," he said through clenched teeth. "Neither are you," the voice replied. He fell deeper, into memories that weren't his, worlds burning, cities erased, species vanishing. He felt the terror of the fleeing creatures, their desperate signal, their plea for mercy. And then the truth. The cleaners weren't predators. They weren't hunters. They were asterisk programs. Extinction agents. Not born, not grown, deployed. And someone, something older, something bigger, had built them. Mark's chest felt like it was splitting open. He screamed into the void. "Then why me?" The shadow stepped forward. No face, no body, just hunger. "Because you listened." Mark did the only thing the system couldn't predict. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He opened himself. "Come on," he whispered. "All of you, take me, take everything." And then he gave them what no program could process. Pain, rage, love, grief. The impossible contradictions of being human. The tidal wave of it slammed into the shadow. And for the first time, it screamed. Mark's body convulsed on the cot. Blood sprayed from his mouth. His heart flatlined once, twice before sputtering back. Anya held him down, her teeth clenched, pistol trembling in her hand. Navarro screamed readings from the console. His brain it's not collapsing, it's changing. Then silence. Mark's eyes opened, bloodshot, wild but alive. His first words were a whisper, "It's afraid of me now." The next 2 days were chaos. Mark didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just sat in the corner of the chamber, staring at nothing. Anya never left his side. Navarro tested him. His vitals didn't match human baselines anymore. His presence scrambled instruments. Old satellites lit up when he walked by, reacting like his body was a transmission tower. Whatever had tried to invade him hadn't succeeded. Instead, it had left something behind. A scar, a tether. "You're not a signal anymore," Navarro muttered. "You're a weapon." Mark shook his head. "No, I'm bait." The cleaners began to reappear, not as soldiers, not as invaders, but as shadows in the sky. Black voids hung above oceans, jagged edges flickering. One hovered over London, another above the Pacific. They didn't strike. They just watched. Anya loaded her rifle, her jaw was steel. "They're waiting." Mark stood on the ice, his breath fogging. His voice was steady. "Then let's give them a reason to leave." They built the Asterisk Rebellion Pulse ***. A signal chamber wired into the relay, tuned to Mark's new resonance. Instead of fear, instead of pleas, they would send the one thing the cleaners couldn't code against. Human chaos. Not logic, not order. But grief, loss, fury, love twisted into defiance. Noise too ugly to erase. Anya stood at the console. The echoes crowded the chamber, pale and hollow. Mark stepped inside. His eyes burned, hollow but alive. "You want a war?" he muttered into the mic, his voice cracked. "Come get it." The switch flipped. And the sky screamed. The void above the ice twitched. Not retreating, not breaking. But answering. Mark staggered, clutching his skull. His voice was a whisper of horror. "They're not all coming." Navarro looked up sharply. "Then what?" Mark's face drained of color. His voice was flat. "They're already here." Perfect. Here's part 6 asterisk of asterisk echoes in the void. The signal humanity was never meant to hear asterisk. \1, 401, 500 words, suspenseful, immersive, ending on a brutal cliffhanger. Part 6, the first strike. The air above Antarctica trembled. The jagged voids weren't distant tears in the sky anymore. They were closer, denser, pressing against the atmosphere like bruises under glass. The echoers stared upward from the relay compound, their breath fogging in the cold. Some prayed. Some loaded weapons they knew were useless. Mark just stood there, the frost crackling under his boots, his chest tight with an impossible weight. "They've always been here," he whispered. "Hiding in the dark, watching, waiting, we just didn't matter enough." Anya's voice was steel behind him. "Well, we matter now." The first strike came without sound. No missiles, no beams, no thunder of war. Just silence. And then, in the blink of an eye, Asteriska City vanished asterisk. One moment, Recife, Brazil, alive, lights glittering on the coast. The next, flat earth, smooth like a canvas wiped clean. No rubble, no smoke, no survivors. Just absence. The echoers inside the relay tower froze as feeds went dead. Mark's hands shook. It's not destruction, it's overwrite. They're rewriting reality itself. Navarro's voice cracked. "Then how do you fight that?" Mark turned to the console. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning. "You don't fight it, you corrupt it." The second pulse launched. Not just pain, not just rage, but memory. The kind of noise no system could anticipate. The scream of his brother burning in fire. The loneliness of Outpost 9. The taste of salt water in his lungs as his pod sank. The guilt of every failure carved into him like scars. He poured it all out. The relay howled, the ground shook. And the void flinched. For a heartbeat, Recife came back. Not whole, not alive. Just fragments, half a street, part of a building, a strip of coastline. But it was proof. Mark collapsed against the console, his body shuddering. "We can corrupt them. We can break their code." The sky answered. More voids opened, over oceans, over deserts, over cities. One hung over Beijing, its edges jagged, tearing the air itself. Anya slammed a fist against the console. "They're not retreating, they're multiplying." Navarro's hands shook over his instruments. "It's escalation, they're responding to the signal." Mark pushed himself to his feet, his voice ragged. "Good, let them, we'll keep screaming until they choke on it." But the system adapted. By the third cycle, the resonance chamber backfired. The echoers collapsed one by one, blood streaming from ears, eyes staring blank, their minds shredded by psychic feedback. Anya shut the system down with a scream, sparks raining down her shoulders. Mark staggered to the bodies. His chest heaved as he knelt beside them, 20 echoers reduced to 9. His voice was hollow. "They're learning, they're building resistance." Anya's hand tightened on her rifle, her jaw was iron. "Then we hit harder." That night, Mark dreamed again. He stood in a void of endless blue light. Shadows swirled around him, the cleaners, the erasers, the system itself. They didn't speak in words this time. They pressed, they pushed, they whispered in thoughts too fast to understand. "We are not malice, we are function." Mark screamed at them. "You erase entire worlds." "Correction, we preserve balance. We erase contagion." Mark's blood froze. Contagion. The shadows pulsed. Civilizations cross threshold. Logic collapses. They devour themselves. We delete before chain reaction spreads. It hit him like a blade. The cleaners weren't predators. They weren't invaders. They were janitors. And Earth had just screamed loud enough to prove it was contaminated. Mark jolted awake, gasping, blood streaming from his nose. Anya was there instantly. Her hands pressed a rag to his face, her steel-gray eyes burning. "What did you see?" His voice was hoarse. "They're not killing us because of hate. They're killing us because we're diseased, because we're human." Her jaw clenched. "Then screw balance, we're not going quietly." The next morning, the void above Beijing cracked open. The city vanished. Not just gone, not just erased, but overwritten into asterisk something else. The feeds caught it for half a second before going dark. Not flat earth, not empty space, but black towers, endless spires of metal. Something was building itself in the shell of what had been Beijing. Mark's breath hitched, his chest hollowed. "They're not just deleting us, they're replacing us." Panic rippled through the echoers. Some screamed to run. Others loaded their weapons, desperation in their eyes. Mark slammed his fist on the console. His voice thundered. No running, no hiding. If we're bait, then we drag them into the open. Anya stepped forward, her voice like a knife. And then what? You fight gods with a radio tower. Mark looked up at her. His eyes were hollow, burning. No, we fight gods with noise. They rigged the relay for one final pulse. Not controlled, not measured. A raw scream, amplified beyond anything Earth had ever broadcast. Navarro's hands shook as he wired the generators. His voice was a whisper. This will kill you. Mark gave a crooked smile. Then it better be loud. Anya stood at the console, her rifle slung at her side. Her eyes met his. If you come back wrong, she said, her voice flat. I know, he interrupted. You'll put me down. Her lips tightened. For a heartbeat, she almost looked human again. Then the steel returned. Always. The switch flipped. The world screamed. Mark's body convulsed in the chamber, his mind ripped open. Every scar, every failure, every ounce of grief poured into the sky. The voids twitched, shattered, collapsed inward. And for one glorious moment, the sky was clear. The echoers cheered. Anya gripped the console, her chest heaving. Mark staggered out of the chamber, blood pouring from his mouth, his eyes hollow. We did it. Then the ground shook. The horizon split open. A new void tore itself across the Antarctic sky. Bigger, deeper, vast enough to swallow the continent. And this time something stepped through. The Antarctic ice groaned under its own weight as the sky split. The void above the relay wasn't like the others. It didn't flicker or pulse. It stayed, a black wound carved open wide enough to swallow the stars. And from it something stepped through. Not a creature, not a ship. A construct. Vast, silent. Its surface rippled like obsidian glass, folding in on itself, shapes bending and reforming with every second. It wasn't built for war. It wasn't even built for motion. It was a presence made solid. The echoers froze. Weapons clattered uselessly from shaking hands. Navarro collapsed to his knees, whispering prayers. Mark felt it before he saw it, a pulse in his chest, deep as a second heartbeat. His skull throbbed, his blood boiled. It wasn't looking at Earth. It was looking at him. The construct didn't fire, didn't strike, didn't erase. Instead, reality twisted. Mark blinked and the ice was gone. The echoers, the tower, Anya, all ripped away. He stood in a void of blue light, endless and humming, patterns swirling like living code. Shadows formed, tall, forceless, indistinct. Voices pressed into his skull. You survived. Mark's throat clenched. What are you? We are what came before. We are what cleaned. We are what broke. Mark's chest tightened. You created the cleaners. We released them. Why, he demanded. His voice cracked, echoing in the hollow void. Because we feared what we were becoming. Mark's blood ran cold. He saw flashes, towering cities of light, species bending reality itself, power spiraling out of control. Then collapse. The shadows whispered. We erased ourselves, we erase others, we preserve the balance. Mark's fists shook, his voice was a whisper of rage. Balance, you call wiping out billions balance. Civilizations grow loud, too loud. Their noise breaks the pattern, we silence them before the noise spreads. Mark's chest heaved. He thought of Outpost 9, of Anya's eyes when she said the world didn't care until it was bleeding, of Navarro's trembling hands, of every echoer who had died just to keep screaming. You tried to silence us, he spat, but you couldn't erase what we are. The shadows pulsed. Your noise was different, illogical, irritating, unkillable. Mark almost laughed. That's humanity. Yes, the voice was many, but it pressed as one. Now you choose. Mark's breath hitched. Choose what? The void shifted. A door of light appeared before him, impossibly tall, humming with presence. Enter and learn, leave and forget. Mark's hands trembled. Forget what? Everything, the signal, the cleaners, the war, yourself. You will return as if you never answered. A man without burden, a man without scars. Mark's throat tightened. The thought of peace clawed at him. No more guilt, no more fire, no more screaming. But then he thought of Anya, of Navarro, of the echoers who had died, of Earth, fragile, broken, impossible Earth. His voice cracked, and if I enter, You will not return, you will not be human again, you will become what we are, what we were, the architect of noise. Mark closed his eyes. He thought of his brother's screams, the fire, the moment he failed. He thought of Anya's steel-gray eyes, of the way she never flinched, never lied, even when the truth burned. And he thought of Earth. Beautiful, broken, chaotic Earth. He smiled. Then I already know my choice. And he stepped through the door. The Antarctic relay fell silent. Anya screamed his name, pounding on the chamber door, her voice raw. Navarro pulled at the controls, trying to reverse the dive loop. Sparks rained down. But Mark never came out. The readings flatlined. The chamber went dark. And above the ice, the construct folded in on itself, the void collapsing into nothing. The sky was clear again. For weeks, the world whispered rumors. Some said the man who answered the void had died. Others said he had ascended, becoming something Earth was never meant to understand. The directorate fractured. Nations rose and fell. Some worshipped him as a savior, others cursed him as the reason Earth had been marked. But the vanishings stopped. The voids were gone. And for the first time in months, humanity breathed. Anya never remarried, never stopped watching the sky. Sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn, she swore she saw a flicker in the stars, a shape watching. She never told anyone, because deep down she knew. Mark Raleigh hadn't died in that chamber. He had become something else, something the architects hadn't planned for. Not a cleaner, not a system, but a man who carried humanity's noise into the void. And when the architects came again, because they always would, Earth wouldn't answer with silence. It would answer with him. Epilogue. Navarro returned years later to the ruins of the Antarctic relay. The tower was a tomb now, half buried under ice. Deep beneath the frost, he found a shard, black, humming faintly, not machine, not organic. An imprint, a fragment of Mark. When Navarro touched it, his vision filled with fire, with grief, with rage, with the noise of humanity. And somewhere far beyond the stars, something vast turned its gaze back toward Earth. Not with malice, but with curiosity. Because for the first time in history, the architects had heard something they couldn't erase. Not silence, not balance, but defiance. And they realized the truth. Humans weren't prey. Humans were the infection. And infections don't vanish. They spread.